All right, it is week number 8 in the NFL. That is crazy how quickly the season is going by. And speaking of bye, we have no bye weeks this week, which, just a quick aside, is really stupid that you have a bunch of teams that have to wait until week 13 or 14 to get their bye week, and then you have weeks like this where there's just no bye weeks. I genuinely don't understand that setup from the National Football League schedule makers, but that's the schedule we got. So, let's dive into it. We start with the Cincinnati Bengals. They are at home taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. No one buying into Philadelphia's big performance against the New York Giants last weekend, as the Bengals are favored by 2.5 points with a total fluctuating between 46 and 47.5, depending on where you are looking. The Eagles got their big win, like I said, against the Giants, but still a lot of concerns about this passing attack, a lot of concerns about how they are going to be able to move the ball. For Cincinnati, it looked a little bit better against Cleveland, but it still has not really found that next gear that I think a lot of people would like to see this team get to. So this one, in terms of a pick, and so for those who are new, the I guess gimmick around here is a pick per game. So I have to at least make one play on these games. All of it is just like for a picking standpoint, and just like a different way of doing a preview. Not necessarily all of these are plays that I'm going to actually make, and I'm certainly not suggesting that you do it as well. Just, how we like to do it around here. So, the pick for me in this one, I'm going to go under. It's both offenses have yet to really lock in, I think. And so I'm going to take under. We're going to go under 47.5, because that's a number we can find there. But that is the furthest thing from something I'm going to click on. Speaking of a stay away game, the Miami Dolphins taking on the Arizona Cardinals. That's coming up next. But first, quick fantasy football look. For a game where I just said under, there's a lot of very prominent fantasy football players in this. You have Jalen Hurts at quarterback for the Eagles. It's tough to sit him based on where you drafted him, and given the fact that like all the weapons basically are there. I think Goddard might be a little bit banged up, but aside from that, all the weapons are there. So it would be a tough sit this week, I think. For Saquon Barkley, I mean, that's a start every week. Same with A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith has been disappointing, but I do think you still have to roll him out there. For the Bengals, again, Burrow, we just took the under, but I think you kind of have to play him. Zach Moss seems like he's getting a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less in that backfield. So that one, hopefully you have better options than that. Chase Brown, I do think is someone you can kind of trust in a flex situation, but Philadelphia's run defense is getting a little bit better, I feel like. And then the pass catching options you kind of got to roll with, right? With Jamar Chase and with T. Higgins. So Arizona taking on Miami. The Dolphins favored by 4 in this game, seeing a little bit of 4.5 out there as well if you're fancying an Arizona play, with the total again fluctuating between 44 and 45.5. A lot of excitement, a lot of trepidation as well around the return of Tua Tagovailoa, which I think is understandable given A, this offense has been dreadful, and B, you just, like, from a human standpoint, it's nice that Tua gets to come back and do what he wants to do. Now, the other part of the human element of this is, hey, so you've had a lot of concussions, and this is getting a little bit concerning. So I think there's going to be some wincing anytime there's any kind of traffic in the pocket or anything like that. Now, this is a safe landing spot because Arizona's pass rush is basically non-existent so far this season. And so I think that is where Miami gets to feel a little bit more comfortable with this particular spot. And so that is why I am going to, again, for the purposes of tracking, going to go Miami minus the 4 points. By the way, we went 9-7 in NFL picks yesterday or last week, and with the CFL best bets that I do on 3 Down Nation, overall we had a 12-8 week. So a nice little week there. Also, best bets have been clicking on 3 Down. We're 9-2 in the last 3 weeks. So peaking at the right time, as you would say. But we'll get to CFL in a little bit here. The New York Jets taking on the New England Patriots. The spread right around 6.5, 7. Some places haven't quite got to that key number just yet. You have the total in this game at 40.5. Ooh. So we're not expecting New England to do a whole lot here. For the Jets, it was a pretty pedestrian outing against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday Night Football. Now, they had success against New England a couple of weeks ago. Now, that was on a Thursday. There is every part of me that wants to go New England +7 in this spot because of the Jets' lack of ability to put points up on the board, but I do have some concerns about what Jacksonville did to that defense, and I'm starting to believe that this defense that we thought was actually going to be a real strong one is actually maybe one you kind of want to target. And so I can't, in all good conscience, suggest that the Jets are going to win this game by more than a touchdown. So the obvious one for me, again, is under, which makes this ugly, but we're going to go under 40 and a half. From a fantasy football standpoint, again, missed it on the Arizona one and Miami. I would wait on Tua just to see if you have to, and you have just been super desperate for the last little while and rolling with like the Will Levis's, Drake Mays of the world, then go for it. But odds are you have been living without Tua for a little bit. You can probably do it for one more week just to see what happens. On the offensive side, I do think that this is going to be a boost for all parties involved. So Achane, Mostert, Waddle, and Tyreek Hill. For Arizona, it has not looked great so far, and Miami's defense has actually been really good in keeping them in a lot of these games. So there should be some concern around Kyler. Again, you probably have to start him. You probably have to start Connor, and you probably have to start Marvin Harrison, but I don't know if I would go with any of the secondary options. And honestly, some of the primary options I would try to find something else for. On to the Jets against New England from a fantasy standpoint, I think that the Jets, again, I think New England's defense maybe is a touch overrated, but the Jets' offense still hasn't really clicked, so I would not be going with Aaron Rodgers this week. But then you got to go with the studs. You got to go with Breece Hall, Devontae Adams, and Garrett Wilson, but the Braylon Allen experiment feels like that one is kind of fading into the background. On New England, we're not going with Drake May in this game, and honestly, the only Patriot that we're trusting is Ramondre Stevenson, who I actually think could be set up for a pretty good day, given the Jets' run defense, some of the issues they have been having. On to Tampa Bay, where the Buccaneers are hosting the Atlanta Falcons in a rematch from a wild Thursday night game a few weeks ago. The Buccaneers are 2.5-point home underdogs, with the total fluctuating between 43 and 45 and a half. I don't get the closeness of this line, quite frankly. I understand that Tampa Bay is at home, but I feel like, given the injuries that Tampa Bay is dealing with on the offensive side, and given how vulnerable we have seen this defense in the last little while, I would suggest that Tampa Bay is going to have a difficult time keeping pace with Atlanta in this one. So this is one of my favorite plays of the week. We are going to go Atlanta minus the 2.5 points. And just quickly here, trying to do everything quickly today because we do have a hard out as we now have on most Fridays. Let's go player props. Let's go down to Kirk Cousins. There he is. 2+ touchdowns. That can't be right. Okay, so let's go. I was hoping for passing yards. There we are, passing yards. The total, total at 241 and a half. I think that's something that we got to do as well. So we're going to go Cousins over line shopping. This is where it works. We got a 240 on here. So we're gonna hit that one at over 240 and a half is what we are going to do with that one as well. I mean, he had almost like 500 yards against these guys a couple of weeks ago, right? So I think that this is going to be a good spot for Atlanta and for Kirk Cousins. So we're gonna click on a couple of those here. Now, back to the other games. Quickly, fantasy standpoint. Obviously, we think Kirk Cousins is going to be successful in this game. I think that is absolutely a player that you can start. I would feel very confident about that. And I think you are starting your Falcons. Bijan, Algier, Mooney, London, and Pitts, all of them, roll with them. For Tampa Bay, McMillan was a popular fantasy pickup this week. I think that there will be a lot of volume out there for him. Baker, given the issues with the weapons, I would have some concerns about starting him. And I think right now, given the unpredictability and volume, I think Rachaad White is the only running back out in Tampa Bay that we can be trusting at this point. Next one is Tennessee against Detroit. I have said that I am officially off of the Tennessee bandwagon, and so even though Detroit is favored by 11.5 points in this game, I think you have to go with that. The one thing that you can look at from a Tennessee standpoint is the potential of a letdown for Detroit after a battle of a division matchup against the Minnesota Vikings, and we saw that Minnesota not look super sharp against the LA Rams here on Thursday. So I think that Detroit, that there is potential that kind of falls off a little bit. So if you want to talk yourself into a Tennessee play, maybe, but this one doesn't require a whole lot of analysis. Detroit is just flat a better football team. They are one of the best teams in the league, facing, honestly, one of the worst, who feel like they are kind of waving the white flag this week with a couple of trades that they have made. We're not clicking on it because that's way too big, but we are trusting in Detroit. From a fantasy standpoint, you're starting your Lions for sure. I think this is a Goff week. I think you can trust, obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs. Montgomery was a little bit banged up, and I just want to get the quick report here on how he is going to be doing from an injury standpoint. Montgomery suits up for practice, so he is fine. So keep an eye on it for Sunday, but I think he would be one that you would feel comfortable playing as well. No Jameson Williams. He is suspended for a couple of games. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think, factors in greatly. And I think Sam Laporta has probably a pretty good game as well. On the Tennessee side, Tony Pollard. That's it. And a Calvin Ridley if you are super duper duper desperate. On to Jacksonville, where the Jags are taking on the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay favored by 3.5 points in this game. Finally, with a total that looks like some from a couple of years ago, with it sitting between 49.5 and 51. For the Packers, they are coming off of what was a bit of a grind against the Houston Texans, and really, Jordan Love has yet to really click the way that he was at the beginning of last year. Now he's coming back from an injury, so there is a little bit of that. But I do think that this is the potential for a get-right spot. I do not have a whole lot of faith in Jacksonville, and I think, honestly, Green Bay's defense will be able to limit the Jags at least a little bit in this game. I am trying to not take Green Bay's defenses seriously. That is one of those preseason improvement things that has just stuck, and I'm trying to get away from it a little bit. We are going to go Green Bay minus 3.5, though. I think they are a significantly better team than the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I understand it is a road game for Green Bay. I do not think of Jacksonville as an overly daunting home field advantage, so I do like Green Bay in that spot, minus 3.5. Houston Texans taking on the Indianapolis Colts. The point spread has Houston, fantasy standpoint. We're getting there. Loves to start. I think I made that pretty clear. Josh Jacobs is an every week start, and I think you can trust all the receivers in Green Bay. And obviously, I think the ranking of trusting goes, Reed is an every week start. I think Watson, this is a good week for him. And then probably Wicks and then Dobbs would be how I would order them. But I do think you can kind of start all of those guys this week. For Jacksonville, this feels like it's a Trevor Lawrence spot. Tank Bigsby continues to be a bit of a beast. I think you go with that. And then Brian Thomas Jr. against a Green Bay secondary that has been a little bit vulnerable at times. Indy taking on the Houston Texans. Houston favored by 4.5 points, with the Colts and Texans total sitting at 43.5 to 45. These two teams played in a bit of a wild one to start the season, and so I think if there is going to be a get-right spot for the Texans, it is going to be against this Indianapolis Colts defense that we have seen doesn't provide a whole lot of variance in what they do. Gus Bradley's defense is going to go out there and it's going to do what it's going to do, and you just have to adjust to it. And the Houston Texans see it a couple of times a year, so they adjust. And they put up some pretty good points in week 1 against the Indianapolis Colts. And with no Nico Collins, this offense has been kind of stuck in the mud a little bit, but I think this is potential for a get-right spot here. And so if it doesn't happen this week, then I'm not really buying into the Texans much going forward, but I think this is the get-right spot for them. I'm going to go Houston minus the 4.5, and we are going to feel confident enough in that one that is going to be one that we click on. If you are not feeling confident in Houston, if you just feel like that this is an offense that isn't really going to find that groove that it had earlier, I totally understand. And I do think that there is certainly some room for Indy to have a good day here. I think there would be maybe a little bit more value in an under than if you think the Texans are going to have a bad day. I still they have been finding ways to win, so I don't know if I would necessarily go on the Indy bandwagon. I would then try to look at the under. You can actually get under 43.5 at plus money right now on CoolBet. So a little bit of a thought for that one. Baltimore taking on the Cleveland Browns. The Ravens favored by 8 points, with the total fluctuating between 44.5 and 46. This is another one where it is just a couple of bad, not a couple of bad teams, but you have the Browns, who are a bad team. Now, Jameis Winston getting the call at quarterback this week should be able to help out a little bit against a Baltimore secondary that has admittedly been vulnerable. That they have given up quite a few chunks out there this year. And so I do think that there is the potential anyway for I do think that this is the potential for a bit of a high scoring game. And so I think honestly over 44.5 is, you just feel a little bit better about it than picking Baltimore to win by 8 in what are traditionally some pretty tight divisional matchups in the AFC North. I want to see, we do have Jameis Winston props here. We do have passing yards. Right now, you can get it at 22 or 227 passing yards. So I actually really like that play. We might roll with that one here at we can get down it to a 225. Well, let's roll with that. Yeah, we are going to go with Winston over 225, because I think they're going to be down, and I think you can throw on Baltimore here. So I like that. And then I do also think that the over is in play for this game as well. So we are going to go with that. We are going to go with the over 44.5 in that particular contest. On to one of the more intriguing games of the week, as Seattle is playing host to the Buffalo Bills. The Bills, road favorites at -3, with a total between 44.5 to 46.5, depending on what you are looking for. I am so interested in this game because on the one side, for Seattle, their defense is getting healthier, and it looked pretty strong in their last outing. And so I think that this could be one of the defenses that starts to maybe limit things against Buffalo just a little bit. Now, Amari Cooper working his way back in. I think it was 40% snap last week for him. I would imagine that goes up as he gets a little bit more familiar in this offense. And so I do think that there is the potential for this one to kind of come back and bite me. But I think Seattle's defense is going to be able to keep this one close. And I think Buffalo's defense has had some troubles with any offense that's been above average this year. So I like Seattle in this spot. I like Seattle there. We will gladly take the 3 points, and we will go Seattle +3. But I don't think that is going to be one that I'm confident enough to click on here on a Football Friday. The Chargers at home taking on the New Orleans Saints. LA favored by 7.5. With the total between 40.5 and 43.5. I think this game gets to bowling shoe ugly territory. For New Orleans, it is all about who is healthy and who isn't. When they aren't healthy, they are one of the worst teams in the NFL. Certainly one of the worst offenses. The Chargers, it was a bit of an ugly one against the Cardinals last week, and so that's why I don't think they blow this one out. I think this is another tight game. So I think that I think New Orleans +7.5 is certainly a play here. And I think there is also an under in this spot. So under 43.5 is certainly a play that I will be looking at in this particular game. So let's see. Under. It is for that 43.5. There is a little bit of juice on that one. You got to lay the -154. So don't necessarily love the value that we are getting right now. But for the purposes of this one, let's go 43.5 on that. Next, it is Carolina on the road in Denver. The Broncos are favored by 9.5 points. Totals between 39.5 and 41.5. It is the return of Bryce Young. Nothing about this game gives you confidence that Carolina is going to do a whole lot. And we just saw Denver put up a pretty good performance against a lesser team, a lesser NFC South team And so now giving Denver some extra time to prepare for this matchup. Granted, they didn't know they were preparing for Bryce Young, but giving them a little bit of extra rest going into this one, it feels gross to take Denver minus so many points, like to assume Denver's going to pick up a blowout win, but we just kind of got it. Denver minus 9.5. Fantasy standpoint, we've kind of skipped over a couple of them. Denver, I don't think I'm trusting basically anyone. Maybe Javonte Williams in that spot has a good game against Carolina, and actually, let's take a look quickly at what the player props could be for old Javonte Williams. Where do we go? Rushing yards. That is at 62.5. It's a little high for us to make any kind of an investment on, but that's right around where people are projecting. Anyway, Kansas City taking on the Raiders. You have a Kansas City team favored by 9.5 points. The total right around 39.5 to 41.5, which kind of tells you what they think the Raiders are going to put up in this game. This one for me, there is no way I think the Raiders hang here. I think that Kansas City's defense just absolutely obliterates anything that the Raiders try to do in this game. And I think given the mockery from the Raiders of Patrick Mahomes in the preseason, I think this is going to be a spot where Kansas City tries to kind of style on him a little bit. So I think that this one is Kansas City minus 9.5 in a real big time way. And let's see here. I want to Zamir White. We don't have Zamir White props unless nope. Do we have Alexander Madison? All right, we do have Alexander Madison rushing yards. It's at 40.5. Honestly, I'm still gonna do it. Madison, we're gonna go under 40.5 rush yards because I don't think they're going to be able to do really anything in this game offensively at all. So I think they really get bottled up there in that spot. Washington at home taking on Chicago. The spread is 2.5 in favor of the Bears with the point total between 40.5 and 42.5 depending on where you are looking. A lot of this obviously depends on the health of Jaden Daniels. I would be surprised if they do bring him out there this week. I think that you have to look a little bit more long-term. And so while it's disappointing that the top two quarterbacks from the draft will not be facing each other, and instead it is Caleb Williams against Marcus Mariota, I think for the long-term health of Washington, you have to do that. The Chicago pass rush is fantastic. And Washington's offense was able to hold it together with Mariota, but I think giving this defense a week to prepare for Mariota and all of that, I think Chicago actually kind of blows this one out of the water. So I am going to go Chicago minus the 2.5, and that is certainly one that we are going to click on here this week. There's a few of those actually. And then on to Sunday night, it is the Dallas Cowboys taking on the San Francisco 49ers. Niners favored by 4. Total sitting between 46.5 and 47.5. I think that this is going to be another long night for San Francisco, for Dallas. Dallas is getting a little bit healthier on the defensive side, while San Francisco was going the opposite way in that receiver room, especially with Ayuk banged up. He's out for the season. Deebo Samuel dealing with pneumonia this week. Now, he was around at practice this week, so there could be something there, but you still have Jennings potentially, Mason and Kittle. I think they will be okay. I do not think Dallas is going to be able to get a whole lot on a San Francisco defense that is going to that is relatively familiar with these guys anyway. I still think San Francisco's defense is good enough that they're going to limit this one. And so I'm not confident enough, given the injuries in San Francisco, to lock in on a San Francisco -4 play, but I do kind of like the under in this game at 46.5. I think San Francisco's defense is going to really shut things down on Dallas. And while Dallas's defense isn't all that good, I do think that the injury issues on San Francisco keep them from really blowing this one out of the water. So we are going to go with the under in that spot. And then we get to Monday Night Football. It is the Giants taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh favored by 6 points with a total 36. So again, we are not assuming that the New York Giants are going to put up much in terms of points in this game, are we? Again, I just think the Giants are a bad football team, and you give Mike Tomlin time to prepare for Daniel Jones. I think that this is going to be a very difficult game for the Giants to put up any kind of points in. And I think we saw last week that maybe there is a vulnerability for the Giants against the run, and the Steelers sure do love to run. So I think Pittsburgh does get the job done. I will take Pittsburgh minus the 6. So not a whole lot for underdog plays this week, but those are the picks from the National Football League.